Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm just so thrilled you're joining us today because we have a truly fascinating stack of material to get into.
We really do. There's so much to cover.
Yeah, we are looking at a highly specific, um, deeply insightful compilation of newsletters from February 2026. Specifically, we're looking at issues 102 through 105.
Right. Penned by the author Angela Hunt.
Exactly. Now, right off the bat, you might be looking at this and thinking, I'm not an aspiring novelist, so why I should care about some author's newsletter?
Which is a fair question.
It is, but let me assure you, this material is far more than just a niche writing seminar. This deep dive is an absolute masterclass in the realities of creativity, finding motivation when your tank is just completely empty.
Harnessing AI, too.
Yes, using artificial intelligence as a partner rather than a replacement, and of course, building a deeply authentic personal brand.
It genuinely is all of that. Whether you are, actively prepping for a massive creative project or trying to figure out how to organize a chaotic workflow.
Or even if you're just insanely curious about how storytellers actually construct the narratives that captivate us.
Right. This material is absolutely packed with aha moments. What I appreciate most about Hunt's perspective is how it completely strips away those romanticized, almost mystical myths of creative work.
Oh, totally.
She replaces those myths with highly practical, actionable insights that you can apply to almost any professional field.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with one of the biggest myths out there for anyone who creates anything, the paralyzing fear of stolen ideas.
That is a huge one. Everyone worries about it.
Right. The source text shares this incredible anecdote about Otzi the Iceman. Hunt saw an article about this ancient, mummified man discovered frozen in the Italian Alps.
Yep.
And it sparked a massive idea for her. She went on to write an entire novel about a woman who believes her baby was conceived using her deceased husband's preserved sperm sample.
Which is already a wild premise.
Right, but then there's a bizarre twist where she discovers the child is actually the product of caveman DNA. Yeah. The kid ends up with unique gifts. A mad scientist is chasing them. I mean, it is a wild, highly specific, incredibly unique premise.
Very specific.
But then, right after her book comes out, her readers start emailing her in an absolute frenzy.
Because they saw something similar.
Exactly. They are outraged because there is a movie playing on network television with the exact same plot.
You can just imagine the absolute panic setting in for her. Hunt even notes in the text that they had previously shopped her story around Hollywood.
Oh, man. So she thought someone took it.
She did. For a few agonizing days, she genuinely believed her intellectual property had been stolen by a studio.
But she looked into it, right?
She eventually investigated, yes.
Yeah.
And the analytical takeaway here is profound. She learned the screenplay for that television movie was actually based on an entirely different novel.
Right.
Written by a man and published before her book even hit the shelves. It was incredibly similar, yes, but it had unique differences.
So it was just parallel thinking.
Exactly. And the bottom line she draws here is crucial for you listening right now or anyone operating in a creative or business field. Ideas are simply in the ether.
They're just out there.
You cannot copyright an idea. You can only copyright the specific expression of that idea. Two entirely different people can read the exact same public article about Otzi the Iceman and follow the exact same logical progression to arrive at a nearly identical premise.
That has to be such a relief for creators who are constantly terrified of sharing their elevator pitch.
It really is.
But looking at the source text, there's another major psychological hurdle we have to talk about. The motivation trap.
Yes.
Hunt brings up Andy Weir, the author who wrote The Martian. He has this fascinating philosophy on motivation.
He argues that there is zero correlation between how motivated you feel in the moment and how good the actual output is.
Right. He claims you can look back at your work a week later and literally cannot tell the difference between the stuff you wrote when you were bursting with inspiration and the stuff you wrote when every single word felt like pulling teeth.
Which is so freeing.
Wait, but I have to push back on that a little bit. Isn't that counterintuitive? Doesn't an audience sense when a creator is just going through the motions versus pouring their absolute passion into a project?
It sounds counterintuitive, sure, but Weir's point and Hunt's agreement with it completely dismantles the idea of relying on the muse. The audience feels the quality of the craft, not the temporary emotional state of the creator.
Okay, I see.
Hunt uses a really profound analogy in the text, comparing long-term creative work to a marriage.
Oh, right, the honeymoon phase.
Exactly. During the honeymoon phase, everything is thrilling, the emotions are soaring, the ideas are flowing easily.
But it doesn't last.
It never does.
Yeah.
Eventually, that initial thrill fades, and love, or in this case, the work, becomes an act of the will. You have to actively choose to commit to it, especially on the days when it is grueling and the passion simply isn't there.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. And there is an anecdote she shared about sitting on a panel at a writers' conference that perfectly illustrates this.
The guy with the question.
Yes. A man in the audience raises his hand and earnestly asks the panel, "Don't you just love writing?"
And her internal reaction is so telling.
She admits she wanted to glare at him and say, "If you love it, you aren't doing it right."
Because writing well is brutally hard work.
Right. It is reading painful revision letters, dealing with negative reviews, agonizing over a single paragraph for an hour. It is absolutely not a constant state of bliss.
Which brings us directly to you, the listener. Think about your own life in your own career. Professional growth in any field means learning how to push through those inevitable days when your passion wanes.
You can't just wait around to feel like doing it.
Exactly. You don't show up because you're overflowing with magical motivation. You show up because you've made the deliberate choice to commit to the craft.
But just showing up and brute forcing your way through the work isn't the whole equation.
Not at all.
If I just show up and type terribly every day, I'm not going to magically write a bestseller. How does the text say we actually elevate the quality of that work?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there's a very common misconception that simply practicing something every single day will automatically make you better at it.
Just putting in the 10,000 hours.
Right, but Hunt clarifies this beautifully. Think of a pianist who wants to play professionally. If they just sit down and play every day without any external feedback or new techniques, they're likely just practicing and deeply reinforcing their own mistakes.
That is such a dangerous trap.
It is. You have to add instruction to your repetition. She breaks this down into the 4 stages of competence, which apply to absolutely any skill you're trying to master.
Break those stages down for us because the text makes it seem like a very distinct psychological journey.
It is. First, you have unconscious incompetence.
The blissful ignorance phase.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know. You think writing a novel or starting a business will be easy. Then, with a little instruction and a few failures, you move to conscious incompetence.
This is the painful phase.
Very painful. You finally realize exactly what you're doing wrong, and you realize how far you have to go.
The "I actually suck at this" phase.
Precisely. But if you keep seeking instruction, you reach the 3rd stage, conscious competence.
Where you're doing it right, but it takes effort.
Yes, you are finally doing things right, but it is exhausting because you have to actively, intensely think about every single mechanical step.
Like learning to drive a manual car.
That's a great comparison. And finally, after years of doing that, you reach unconscious competence. This is the flow state.
Where it just happened.
You are executing at a very high level without even having to think about the mechanics anymore.
To get to that final stage, you clearly need the right vocabulary to understand your own mechanics.
Words matter.
They do. I was reading through the jargon introduced in these newsletters, and it feels like getting the secret insider knowledge of how stories are built.
It really is a peek behind the curtain.
I know there were a few terms that really stood out, like retcon and breadcrumbs. How does the text define those?
A retcon, which is short for retroactive continuity, is when a creator introduces a piece of new information that forces a completely new interpretation of past events.
Usually to fix a plot hole, right?
Usually, yes. But the text warns that a retcon will always feel like a cheap trick to the audience unless you use seeding or scaffolding.
Ah, which brings us to leaving breadcrumbs.
Exactly. Leaving breadcrumbs means dropping very subtle hints early on in the project so the later payoff feels earned.
The example she uses is fantastic.
It is. If a body is buried under a shed in Chapter 10, you leave a breadcrumb in Chapter 2 by having a character casually advise the protagonist not to bother repairing that old shed.
It just seems like a throwaway line of dialogue.
But it's actually invisible scaffolding.
I also noticed the term interstitials. I know in biology that refers to the tiny spaces between grains of sand where microscopic plankton live.
But Hunt applies it to storytelling.
Right. She uses it to refer to the quiet transitional spaces between the major, explosive plot events where the characters actually process what just happened.
Which are so necessary for pacing.
Definitely. There were also some great general vocabulary words she highlighted. I saw maudlin and hirsute in there. What is the backstory on those?
Maudlin means overtly weepy or overly sentimental. The interesting historical note there is that it actually derives from Mary Magdalene, who was frequently depicted weeping in Middle Age art.
I had no idea about that connection.
It's fascinating. And her suit simply means hairy. She notes it sounds exactly like wearing a hair suit, which is a fantastic mnemonic device making it impossible to forget.
Air suit, here suit, that's perfect.
She also brings up puerile, meaning extremely childish. But while it is fun to learn new terms, the text is equally clear on what creators need to actively avoid.
What should they avoid?
Specifically, filter words and hedges.
What makes a word a filter or a hedge?
Filter words are unnecessary sensory tags, words like saw, heard, or felt.
Give me an example.
Instead of writing, he heard the bell clang, you just write, the clanging bell startled him. It removed the artificial distance between the reader and the action.
Okay, that makes it much more immediate. And hedges.
Hedges are those fuzzy, non-committal words like something or somehow.
Oh, I use those all the time.
We all do in early drafts. But instead of saying something in his face set her on edge, you find the exact specificity. The sudden wariness in his eyes set her on edge.
Precision is what elevates the work.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the newsletters dive deep into how we can actually use modern technology to achieve that level of precision.
You have to talk about AI.
Yes, Hunt talks extensively about embracing AI as a creative partner rather than fearing it as a replacement.
Which is a very healthy mindset.
She discusses a program called AutoCrit. She had this old manuscript sitting in a drawer, pulled it out, and ran it through AutoCrit's Alpha Reader feature.
And she chose a very specific persona for it.
Right. She specifically chose the harsh critic persona. And she admits, this AI critic completely called her out on a touchy plot point. She had written in a literal miracle to save her characters.
The AI didn't let that slide.
No, it didn't. The AI didn't solve the problem for her, but it gave her the necessary brutal push in the right direction to fix it herself.
That's the perfect use case.
Plus, the platform has a feature called Market Fuel that handles all the grueling administrative marketing stuff. Suggesting titles, writing book blurbs, generating Amazon keywords.
Even writing Facebook ad copy.
Right. It is a phenomenal utility for an independent creator.
But she didn't stop at AutoCrit. She also utilized ChatGPT as a developmental editor.
Explain what a developmental editor does, for those who might not know.
A developmental editor doesn't just check for spelling. They look at the big picture pacing, character arcs, and structural logic.
And using an AI for that sounds tricky.
It is, and the way she utilized ChatGPT is a masterclass in prompt engineering. She didn't just paste her text and ask, is this good?
Because that never works.
Never. She gave the machine highly specific parameters. She uploaded 40 pages at a time and asked it to check for redundancies and to flag any deus ex machina moments.
And a deus ex machina is that cheap storytelling trick we were talking about earlier, right?
Yes.
The god from the machine, where an impossible event magically solves the hero's problem out of nowhere.
Precisely. She also asked the AI to look out for her personal weasel words,
which she brilliantly types in all CPS in her rough drafts so she can spot them easily.
It's a great system. But the most clever prompt was asking ChatGPT to ensure her characters were staying true to their specific Myers-Briggs psychological personality type.
That blew my mind.
It's brilliant. She told the AI, make sure Heather stays true to her ESFP personality, meaning she should act extroverted, observant, feeling, and prospecting.
And for the other character?
She said, make sure Josh stays true to his INFJ personality.
Yeah.
Introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging.
And it worked.
It did. The AI actually caught a line of dialogue where Josh sounded more like the tough police chief than his own introverted self.
That is such an incredible way to leverage the technology to maintain consistency. But it wasn't all perfect, was it? The text seems to highlight several areas where the AI completely dropped the ball.
What's fascinating here is that alongside those successes, she meticulously documented the AI's failures.
Because AI is not a boogeyman coming for everyone's jobs.
Exactly. It is certainly not perfect. For instance, ChatGPT absolutely hated her use of the rule of three in her sentence structures and kept aggressively telling her to delete rhetorical components.
Oh, it just didn't understand the style.
Not at all. Also in her story, God speaks to the protagonist inwardly, and the AI kept telling her to tone that down, completely missing the theological context.
It just reads it as an error.
Right. It entirely missed the subtle emotional subtext of characters making false assumptions about one another.
And there was a big continuity error it made, too.
Incredibly, yes, it completely mixed up the plot lines of two female characters. It thought a character named Sarah's baby belonged to Heather, who had actually suffered a miscarriage in the story.
Which is a classic AI hallucination.
A massive one.
Where the machine just confidently invents facts that completely contradict the text it was fed.
Exactly. And this is the vital takeaway for you as a listener. AI should be utilized like a highly advanced spell checker.
You run your work through it.
You read the advice, you weigh it, you measure it against your own vision, but you remain the final decision maker. You don't let the machine dictate the soul of your project.
Because it doesn't have a soul.
Exactly. It fundamentally lacks the human imagination to create elegant solutions beyond the scope of the data it already has.
Speaking of the soul of a project, the text gets deeply into the necessity of stepping away from the machine entirely to find that soul.
This is such an important segment.
There is a beautiful concept shared from Robert Pirsig, the author of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Pirsig notes that if a plant gets nothing but constant sunlight, it's actually very harmful to its biology.
Wait, really? I thought plants just love the sun.
They do, but a plant physically requires periods of darkness. In the sunlight, it converts carbon dioxide to oxygen, but in the dark, it takes that oxygen and converts it back to sustain itself.
Oh, wow.
He argues that the human brain operates the exact same way. We need periods of intense doing, and we require periods of absolute non-doing.
And importantly, scrolling through Facebook Reels or watching TikToks does not count as non-doing.
Absolutely not, because your brain is still actively occupied in consuming data.
Yeah.
You need genuine, unbusy time for your creative side to engage and for ideas to organically spark.
Okay, so building unbusy time to let ideas grow sounds great in theory.
But hard in practice.
Yeah. The newsletters mention Elmore Leonard's famous baseline rules for writing. Things like no weather openings, avoid prologues, limit exclamation points to 2 or 3 per 100,000 words.
Those are great structural rules.
They are. But how does someone actually execute the deeper stuff when real life gets in the way? How do we build something profound, like a theme, without sounding like we're just preaching our opinions to the audience?
That is one of the most profound sections of the source material. The core rule Hunt emphasizes is, you don't state your theme, you build it.
Show, don't tell.
Exactly. And it always starts with a question, not a message.
A question.
If you start with a message, if you already know the right answer before you even begin the work, you are just writing propaganda.
People hate that. Readers and consumers can instantly sense that invisible finger wagging at them.
They absolutely can. Instead, you start with a question you are genuinely wrestling with yourself. What happens when faith collides with overwhelming fear?
Or what does true forgiveness really cost a person?
Yes. And then you let the characters carry that theme through their own flawed choices, rather than having them just voice your opinions.
They have to make mistakes.
Theme emerges naturally when a character's flawed, deeply held beliefs collide with the reality of the world. And to avoid being preachy, you have to use intelligent opposition.
What does that mean, practically?
You must give your protagonist a highly credible alternative viewpoint. Let the wrong choice actually look incredibly attractive and logical for a while. If every character in the room agrees with the theme, the story is flat.
You also have to show the cost, right?
Yes, if your theme is forgiveness, you have to show the agonizing, unfair pain of letting a massive offense go. You don't rush to the neat, tidy moral lesson. You linger in the sacrifice.
And you use quiet symbols to reinforce it.
A locked door, a withered tree. They don't explain the theme, they just silently echo it.
Hunt shares a brilliant real-world example of this from her own novel, A Most Peculiar Providence.
I love this example.
She had this book sitting in a drawer for years and admits she didn't even know what the theme was until she ran it through AutoCrit.
And the AI analyzed it.
Right. It told her the theme was mercy versus law. She had written a benevolent hero who had hidden a dead body 20 years ago.
An act of pure mercy to protect a vulnerable woman and her son.
Exactly. But in the present day, the body is finally found.
And this is where the cost we just talked about comes in.
Hunt desperately wanted the court to forgive this kind, elderly hero. She wanted a lawyer to give a grand speech about justice lightening up.
But she realized that wouldn't be true to the theme she had built.
No, it wouldn't. Her hero held two fiercely conflicting beliefs. He didn't regret his merciful action, but he also deeply fundamentally believed in the rule of law.
So, to honor the theme, the benevolent hero happily goes to prison.
Which is heart-wrenching.
But necessary.
Yeah.
The theme isn't a sermon. It is a universal principle experienced from the inside out.
It is so incredibly powerful when it's done right. But again, to get to the point where you are executing themes that, well, you have to sit down and do the unglamorous work.
You can't escape the work.
There is an amazing anecdote about the comedian Chris Rock in these newsletters that hits on this. He grew up in a tough Brooklyn neighborhood surrounded by gangs, And someone asked him how he managed to avoid falling in with that dangerous crowd.
His answer was so simple.
He said he simply wasn't a gang follow-up guy. He didn't go to the gang meetings. He didn't buy the clothes. He didn't put in the daily effort to be a gangster.
But when he found stand-up comedy,
He became a massive comedy follow-up guy. He went to the dive bars every single night. He watched the late-night sets on TV. He put in the romps.
this raises an important question for you, the listener. What is your follow-up? Putting in the daily reps in your chosen field.
It applies to everything.
It does. If you want to be a coder, are you doing the follow-up of learning new languages on the weekends? If you want to start a business, are you doing the unglamorous follow-up of researching tax codes and market trends?
And to help with that follow-up, the text offers the absolute simplest organizational tool imaginable to force you to do the work.
A blank calendar.
Literally just a calendar.
Hmm.
You print it out, you aggressively cross off the days you realistically cannot work, and you set a tangible daily goal for the remaining blank days.
A word count, a line of code, whatever it is.
And you do not go to bed until that daily goal is met.
Or, unless a true medical emergency forces you to adjust the schedule.
Yeah.
Deadlines are invaluable, even if you are self-publishing and setting those deadlines entirely yourself.
Setting internal deadlines is one kind of pressure, but there is another massive pressure that almost every modern creator dreads.
Building a platform.
Yes, we are constantly told we need a social media presence to succeed today.
And the text acknowledges how paralyzing that demand can be.
People usually respond by either oversharing in a desperate attempt to seem raw, or they just stay entirely silent out of fear.
But the newsletters clarify that true authenticity is not oversharing.
No, it isn't. Oversharing is just venting. It's immediate, it lacks perspective, and it's ultimately asking the audience for comfort.
Authenticity is reflecting. It's keeping a little professional distance and offering connection based on something you've actually processed and learned.
Hunt provides a phenomenal litmus test for navigating this.
The kitchen table test.
Yes. Before you post anything online, you ask yourself, would I say this to a thoughtful friend sitting across from me over coffee?
If it feels performative, exaggerated, or overly whiny, you simply don't post it. You write to share your process, your observations, and to build gentle accountability.
I couldn't stop laughing at her real-life social media experiment regarding this.
It's a great story.
She's a highly successful published author. She posts these polished, traditional, professionally designed ads for her books.
And what happens?
Absolute crickets, hardly any engagement. Then she posts a random story about accidentally spewing pulverized liver all over her kitchen ceiling.
And another update about building your chicken coop.
And the engagement goes completely through the roof. People don't want to connect with a corporate billboard. They want to connect with a human being who makes messes.
And the final piece of advice the text offers on this front is to write for one single person, not the algorithm.
Because algorithms are constantly changing.
But fundamental human nature does not. When you try to game the algorithm, your voice becomes tight, forced, and you sound exactly like everyone else shouting into the void.
But when you write as if you are speaking to one specific, real reader, you relax into your true voice.
And crucially, always end your posts with a question. If you invited someone to sit with you for coffee, it would be incredibly rude to talk at them the entire time and never allow them to speak.
Asking a question is a gracious acknowledgement of your guests.
It really is.
So what does this all mean?
It's time to pull it all together.
If we distill everything we've talked about today from these surprisingly deep February 2026 newsletters, it comes down to this.
Mastery.
Yes. Mastery, whether you are writing a sweeping historical novel, building a tech startup, or just navigating the complexities of your career, is not about waiting for a lightning bolt of magical motivation or hunting for an entirely original, never-before-seen idea.
It is about actively, stubbornly committing to the work.
It's about utilizing the right tools, whether that's a complex AI engine like ChatGPT or just a printed piece of blank paper for a calendar, while always recognizing the limitations of those tools.
Exactly. It's about showing up authentically in the world.
Doing your unglamorous follow-up, and perhaps most importantly, allowing yourself the grace of genuine, unbusy time.
We spent a lot of time talking about doing that unglamorous follow-up and the necessity of spending time in the dark to let those ideas grow.
We did.
It makes you wonder, and this is something I'd love for you to think about after we sign off. We talked about how plants literally require darkness to process what they've absorbed in the sunlight.
Right.
It raises a fascinating question for you. In a culture that demands constant productivity and constant sunlight, What vital, life-giving oxygen are you accidentally starving your brain of by refusing to sit in the dark and just do nothing?
Wow. That is a heavy but deeply necessary question to ask ourselves. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take that question with you, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.